Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar with Traction Complete. While we're waiting for everybody to join, go ahead and just drop some information in the chat, share where you're from and what your go-to market priorities are for this coming year or your favorite planning tools. Hi, Rebecca from Toronto. Let's see what we got. Focus this year on doing more with less. I think that's on everybody's plan. Portland, Oregon, expanding our team this year to segment out enterprise verticals using Zoom info mainly to guide our planning. Awesome. Just give it a couple more moments here for everybody to join in. If you are just joining us, we are asking everyone if you could just drop where you're from in the chat and your go-to-market strategies for this coming year or your favorite planning tools. We're just going to give it a couple more moments for people to join in, make sure everybody's covered. Nice, France. That's a long ways away.
Nice, but it's beautiful there right now.
I'm a little jealous. I wish I was there.
Kidding. Sitting in snow here.
There you go. Yep. All right, so we're about 5 minutes after. We're going to go ahead and get started. I will go ahead and kick off the introductions here. My name is Gina Guerrieri. I am the Partner Success Manager here at Rev Genius. We're joined today with our really awesome partner, Traction Complete. We're joined by Matt, who is Sales Strategy and Operations at Capado. Matt is an expert in revenue operations and sales with over a decade of experience at companies like ADP and Capado. Matt, do you want to go ahead and say hello and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Matt Wester. Do sales planning, territory planning over at Capado, currently in Orlando, Florida. Got to RevOps through long career in sales, done insurance, telecom, worked for people like Sprint, Liberty Mutual, ADP, and thankful that you guys would have me today here to have some operational discussions.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you. We also have Dave. Dave is the CEO of Traction Complete with over 18 years of experience in software and leading go-to-market teams. Dave, tell us a little bit about what Traction Complete does.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for having me, Gina. I love what you guys are doing with Rev Genius. It's so impressive, the attitude of the community, learning from one another. It's hopefully we can contribute a little bit back today. But yeah, Traction Complete. We believe that data is this like incredible instruction set for businesses when it's done properly. And so we're on a mission to try and reduce the complexity of data in Salesforce through software that automatically links accounts into hierarchies, that matches leads to accounts and makes sure they're assigned to the right people. And then by normalizing and deduplicating dirty data.
That's awesome. Dave, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and have you tell us all about territory conflicts, as I'm sure it's top of mind going into 2023.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are probably right in the thick of their territory planning right now. But yeah, thanks, Gina. I think everyone on this call probably has an example of a great sales rep doing their job, generating demand, working ops through their funnel, and when they get close to the end zone, finding out that op falls into someone else's territory. And that just causes chaos for the team. At best, it's a frustration. And at worst, it becomes a huge drain on the team and the efficiencies, reps leaving, and can even cost revenue, right? Either paying double commissions or by having a poor customer experience that leads to not closing deals. Yeah, and so I think right now it's probably appropriate timing. Like we said, everyone's in the thick of territory planning for next year for those whose fiscal year starts in January or February if they're following Salesforce. And that's why I'm excited to talk to Matt here at Capado. So, Matt, maybe just a little bit more about yourself. What does Capado do?
So Capado helps Salesforce release teams move faster with better quality. Um, as orgs evolve, more plugins, more automations, more validation rules, simple things like adding fields can get a little bit more complicated, especially when you have multiple orgs, multiple sandboxes, you're doing acquisitions, merging data, and Capado helps provide visibility into those pipelines to be able to automate your testing with these releases and make sure things aren't breaking and that everybody's got full visibility into your production orgs as you're deploying.
We actually came from a bit of a consulting background, and so I know just how important that is in all of the deployments moving from sandboxes to productions and all the releases that go along with any changes. Yeah, that's awesome. What does the team look like over there? What's the go to like the sales team and ops team?
So we've ramped up over the past few years. We started with just kind of a get whatever you can get mentality, just whatever's coming in, whatever's hot, jump on it. And as of last year, we started to split out our team into a commercial and an enterprise segment. So that was new for last year, letting more seasoned strategic reps maneuver complex corporate hierarchies and leverage potential deals that they've got into other BUs within those organizations. And then also having a commercial side of the business to be able to focus on smaller companies, less complex orgs, quicker transactions. So we've got a global team at the moment. We've got a US team and we've got a APAC team and EMEA team, and we're focused on global sales at the moment.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So that's adding complexity, I'm sure, in terms of the go-to-market and territories and everything.
Big time.
Yeah. And I know before Capado, you were with ADP, which already was global, I'm sure. And so had probably teams across every vertical and segment.
Yeah, correct. So ADP's 60,000 employees globally, huge sales team. And not only are the territories complex, but they have multiple products that they service. So their bread and butter has traditionally been payroll. So maybe you come in as a payroll client, you're going to have overlays of additional sales teams that are going to work with the main account owners. Maybe they're going to try and sell insurance, retirement, 401ks, planning, all of these supplemental products. And so all of those reps have to align to that main quarterback. And so there's literally almost like a butterfly effect, territories within territories, within territories, within territories, quite complex.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, so that was a full-time job.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. Well, that's great. So, I mean, you're obviously an expert at this and have been through it, and I think are probably going through it right now. You've seen, I know from talking to you in the past, a lot of territory conflicts and disputes. Where do you think most of them are stemmed from?
Most stem, in my experience at least, dirty data. I've got to put at the top of that list. And maybe not the best communication or unclear rules as far as engagement. As we know with territories, there's a lot of gray area that can be interpreted. And also different data providers sometimes have different metrics just depending on who's more up to date or who's scrubbed their list recently. And so when you mix kind of a loose policy and communication structure with bad data, kind of like if you've ever seen those videos dropping Mentos and Diet Coke, it's gives you explosive sales team interaction.
Yeah. Well, that's a great analogy. I love that. Okay, so yeah, most of it's come from bad data. What does it look like for you guys, and how do you overcome that? What is your steps to avoiding that and setting your sales teams up for success?
So at Capado, unlike ADP, where they've got a lot of headcount resources, of course, a huge publicly traded global enterprise company, they're able to segment out their accounts quite strategically. And we currently run with a model where if you own a larger enterprise subsidy, you own that family. And we've had issues in the past with trying to identify these parent-child hierarchy links. There's some easy ones. Most people know that Hulu's owned by Disney and um, Paramount and that family. A lot of the media families are fairly obvious, but some of them not so much, especially when it gets into holding companies and private equity and whatnot. And so that was a challenge in the past, especially when you're trying to move quick, a fast scaling organization that's trying to keep up with the market. A lot of times you don't have the resources and the luxury to sit there and pick through all of these things and spend multiple weeks trying to get it right ahead of time. A lot of times you're just trying to keep up. And so this past year we found a great tool that helps automate some of this. I think it's called Traction Complete, actually. Shameless plug there for y'all, I guess. But it's helped us out in just being able to get some visibility into some of these accounts that might not have stood out as obvious legal hierarchy connections. Before, we'd have a situation where a lot of times nobody would really pick up on some of this stuff until there was a deal open. The account's been sitting there for however long and nobody notices it, but a lead comes through, a meeting gets booked, you get an op on the account, it gets put in a forecast, the leader on some other team sees the account and they're like, hey, wait, actually, that's a part of this or whatever the case. And so a lot of times these disputes weren't coming up to anybody's attention until you've already got a deal going. There's already been a meeting. Somebody from the client side's already talked to somebody from our side. There's already some initial rapport getting built. It becomes a lot harder to move a deal or reintroduce somebody or get in alignment, I guess, with your structure at that point. Once there's money on the table, one is bad look on the client side to say, hey, we don't have our stuff together. Let me introduce you to the person you should have been talking to start with. So that's not a good look. But then on the other side, rep salespeople are certainly better at meeting in the middle and having these conversations when there's no money on the line. But once the deal's already hot and it's been forecasted, it's not quite as easy. And so being able to identify this stuff ahead of time and have it incorporated into your planning season helps mitigate any contention post deal. It's already in the right spot. If a lead comes in, somebody hits a webinar, books a demo on your website, lead's able to flow right to where it's supposed to be. It's already in that person's name, and you're set.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. If you're set up ahead of time. You mentioned kind of the rules of engagement there. How do you guys go about setting that up ahead of time before like the territories and whatnot are built and defined?
So that's a moving goalpost, I guess. Every year we learn from mistakes in the past or situations that didn't work out. And so I don't know that there's necessarily a gold standard of, do it this way before you get started and everything's going to be just fine. I think there will always be room for improvement, certainly as the business changes, as market conditions change. Even what may have been perfect for your past year may not necessarily be the best strategy for your next year that you're planning for. So somewhat of a loaded question. The main point that I'd stick to there is definitely be self-aware in owning your mistakes, being able to say what has worked and what hasn't worked, try and reflect on where a majority of the contentions come from, and make sure you address it. We kind of play as a team sport over here. It's not any one person's call how we set those rules up necessarily. A couple proposals get put in, have a little powwow, everybody gets to talk about it. Ultimately, leadership needs to be on board with whatever gets set forth. So it's not necessarily all in the hands of one person. Everybody gets to say their piece, if you will.
It's probably safer for that person too, so there's not one throat to choke when there's problems.
Yeah, agreed. Although there is still a couple easy outs here and there. But yeah, and this helps spread your leverage around, right? It's universal buy-in. So if one of these disputes do come up, mitigation is required. It's a lot less likely that they can call playing favorites, or any sort of conditional bias, if you will. If you can say, hey, mutual panel here, even people that you report to, we all hashed this out, everyone agreed on it. There's a mutual buy-in from all stakeholders on this. It'll work your way too. I mean, just Murphy's Law, right? If you don't like this call, I'm sure there'll be another team that doesn't like a call that gets made down the road that'll be in your favor. So, hold your breath and we'll get there.
Absolutely. Now, I think you guys actually set policies at the beginning of the year as well, right? That before the reps have seen their territories, so that they know kind of how any potential disputes are going to be managed, and that they know what that process looks like, so that they can't be as upset about it later.
Yeah, I just got here in November of last year, so right before our planning season, and that's how we went into the year, was doing a sales kickoff, letting people understand the rules. Here's the policies. Here's how we're going to play ball, and here's your accounts, versus showing them the accounts and then laying out the rules. Didn't want to necessarily give room for any additional arguments to get made on the back end. If the rules sounded good up front, then it sounds good, versus seeing, oh, well, this means I can't have that. Maybe we should go back and revisit this. It's like, no, you said it sounded good.
I think that's such a great idea. And we learned that from you guys, because you're exactly right. Usually you roll out your territories, you show them everyone, and immediately you have complaints that this account is no longer mine, or I should have that one, or whatever. And so I think it's brilliant to have those policies in place that everyone agreed to and signed off on before they see them, so that you can kind of temper those emotions anyway. Yeah. Okay. So,
yeah, agreed.
So rules of engagement policies at the beginning. Any other actual policies that you put in place that people might benefit from learning about before moving on to step 2 here?
Let's see, maybe just some basics. We have not yet adopted a formal hunter farmer approach yet. I don't know that we've hit that scale, although we're considering it. But so this example will be within the context of that structure not being in place. But things like, if you do close the deal, you get to keep that throughout the year, regardless of segment changes. Maybe they found outside investment, probably not right at the moment, but just for the sake of the example, they doubled their investments, and maybe they ramped up and doubled their hiring, and those numbers would potentially push it to a different segment. So locking some things in place, like, hey, if you hunt and killed this and you that's yours, then keep that for the year. You can stay in touch with these people. You can certainly be vested in their long-term success, grow the account. And if they did just get that huge the next year, then, we'll have to reevaluate what segment that falls under. But being able to keep people confident that they're going to be able to reap the longer term benefits of, being able to land and expand. We're a SaaS company, it's a SaaS motion. So land and expand's a huge part of what we do, like many others. A lot of times what there is to get out of an account is coming off the back end, not necessarily that first deal anyway. So certainly want to keep people motivated, and then keep them vested in that customer success. Again, like with any SaaS product, you need to get them implemented, up and running and successful with your product to make sure it's sticky. And people think they're going to lose these customers, they may not be as motivated to check in with them, keep in touch, and make sure they're up and running.
Yeah, no, it's such an important aspect, and it actually is a great segue over into that second step, I think, which we usually see as the kind of data cleanup exercise ahead of rolling out territories, ahead of carving. What does that look like at Capado?
So right now we are going through, I see data cleanup kind of in two stages. One being, of course, cleaning what you've got. Again, most fast scaling SaaS companies invest in ops last, invest in sales first, just scale growth at all costs type of model. And so a lot of times you end up, I would say, with a fair amount of dirt once you get past that initial growth phase. That's typically about the time you start looking for some ops help to come in and help clean it up. So, you got one aspect, getting rid of your duplicates, making sure that all your territory fields and segments are in alignment, and making sure that if you're using employee or revenue metrics to do your segmentation, that's up to date. The other half of that is doing, a system or process audit such that you can identify how this stuff's getting in there in the first place. Do you not have your duplicate rules turned on? Do too many people have permissions to just create accounts? Is there no third-party oversight auditing new account creation? Is your enablement team working with ops on a regular basis to evangelize the rest of your organization and best practices? Who's at what point are you converting leads? When are you creating contacts? Are you putting them on multiple accounts? Are you putting them on the wrong accounts? Are you, what do these processes look like? Is there documentation? Are there best practices? Because you're going to get stuck in that back end cleanup phase on a regular basis if you're not looking at, how it's coming in the first place. So right now, that's where a lot of our focus is on currently, is locking down our systems, looking at permissions, auditing who's got the ability to do what, and not just people, but tools. A lot of these integrations, automations, tons of different tools that will, scrub your email and then scrub your Salesforce and start adding contacts that are missing to the accounts that they think are the right accounts. It could be like, I've seen some that just use a basic domain match. And so maybe you got a global company that's using the same domain on all of their emails across their org. And so they're dumping contacts into, this Netherlands account that's got more people in it than probably more cities in the Netherlands, So auditing your tools, auditing automations, trying to, figure out how is it getting this way, so we can hopefully not have to run these exercises multiple times throughout the year.
Oh yeah, that's so important, the data governance. And you're exactly right. Integrations tend to be a major source of dupes, as well as all the other ones you talked about, converting leads, manual creation. Okay, so you're governing that. I know that a large portion of, well, and you touched on it already, of creating territories is also your segmentation. And what does that look like for you guys to use, like, I'm guessing, an external data provider to enrich that information so you get a clear understanding of who's who?
Yeah, we do use various enrichment tools at the moment. some of these tools, they provide enrichment, even if that's not necessarily what you're looking for. In a sense, like we use 6sense for intent data. It's been working out real well for us. They happen to also provide enrichment capabilities. We use Zoom Info for contact data, and Sales Nav, of course, is fairly standard. They'll also enrich your accounts and enrich your contact data. We also use DNB at the moment, as well as an account data plugin. Typically, they're used for more finance related things, business credit ratings and such, but they also provide enrichment. So that's kind of part of setting these rules, is like, which one of these is going to be the source of truth. There's potential for all of them at some points to have different data. They'll typically all be within the ballpark at least, but so yeah, enrichment is a part of the strategy right now. I think we've probably got too many enrichment tools, so we're working through that, trying to figure out which one's the most consistent and stick with it.
Smart. Yeah, because you need to have that line in the sand, right? You need to be able to say, if you're segmenting by employee count or what it may be, that you're going to go and find a different answer elsewhere online, right? You get 500 answers for the number of employees or the revenue at a business, but that you need somewhere to be that source of truth for your team to kind of mitigate all the complaints.
Yeah, and I've even noticed in some instances, like with Dun and Bradstreet, maybe they'll match the account to a branch or a sub, and not necessarily a headquarter location. So it's not giving me the full revenue until I catch it and say, hey, that looks off. I think that's probably $1 billion company based on their last quarterly earnings call. This is public data, so let's take a look at what's going on. And yeah, maybe there was a funny address in there. Maybe the address came from the initial lead. Maybe on the form that they submitted, they put in their work address or their personal address, their office location. And so that comes through, converts into the account, and then the enrichment will match it to a branch. And then you're getting the branch revenue data, if you will, versus the actual headquarter enterprise data. For ADP, that was important. They're focused, they've got big different segments. Same with Sprint. You've got people sitting there walking into individual branch locations trying to sell them. But enterprise software, we're typically just focused on getting in at a headquarter level. Walking into the Verizon store wherever you live isn't going to help us sell any sort of enterprise SaaS software to Verizon. The local guy slinging phones on that corner is not going to be able to call corporate IT and help push a deal through. So we're not necessarily focused on those data points. We want to get to a headquarter location. So sometimes even you put the enrichment in place, you try and keep your stuff clean, you'll still find some holes. And that's where I think working with enablement to get over communication in the org is real important. If you got a commercial guy who understands the rules and knows what the deal is, and an account pops into his territory that, it's like, should I really be calling Verizon? I'm 3 years out of school, I'm an entry-level rep here. Am I really supposed to be closing this deal right now?
They'd be so excited. I got
Yeah,
an enterprise op here.
We'll go ahead and take the meeting, but we're going to pull it from you. So it's best practice, to go ahead and bubble it up. Hey, I think there was a mistake here. Can you double check this data for me? And, swap it with something I can close. It's either that or spend your time selling it and you're going to get the deal snatched anyway. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think what I heard, use those data providers, whether it's a plethora of them like you're using, or if it's an individual source of truth, but get your data updated. And I think what you said earlier was that make sure you're saying that, hey, this is the rule for the year, because there will be changes throughout that year. There'll be updates, but you're not going to want to have to reassign this account midway through the year because their employee or their revenue count changed. So you're kind of locking it in. Is that right?
If you've closed that deal, if that's your customer and you've got rapport with them and you've closed it, yes. in the event that there is no deal and nobody's worked this account and nothing's happened to it, yeah, and let's say they triple in size, we certainly want the right person to be on that right deal, who's got the right kind of experience in navigating that sort of an organization. So no, if nobody's working the account and something changes, that's a different scenario. But if you've already closed the deal and you got that customer, you put that hard work in, you worked with your partners, you worked with your BDR, you did all the triangulation, you set up meetings, did the research. I mean, so much goes into a sales motion before there's even a demo call. It's a lot of work that gets done. We don't necessarily want to penalize that. So we distinguish those two from each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I like that. I've heard others at different accounts. And again, it probably comes down to different sizes of businesses, that some, when they have their full kind of total addressable market as account records in Salesforce, that it's pretty established on whose territory it falls into, and they'll lock it. In fact, Salesforce themselves do that. So they have,
Yep.
you can imagine, they've touched pretty much every account on the planet, I'm sure. And they lock those territories for the year so that no one, even though there's changes throughout and that a company triples in size and whatnot, that it's locked down until the next year. But I can also imagine that at companies that haven't hit that total addressable market, that are in the process, that's smart, because you're right, you're kind of preempting any conflicts or at least emotions by giving them that opportunity. DocuSign is a big customer of ours, and I know that they spend almost 50% of their territory planning time on the data cleanup ahead of time, so that they can avoid those territory conflicts later. Because they found, by not doing that, like you were saying, learning from problems and struggles in the past, that even though they'd carved them evenly, the dirty data ended up causing problems later.
Yeah, well, it's not even if you got two of the same accounts and, each patch, and I've run across that myself, like, all right, everybody's got 40 accounts and, a couple 100 million revenue across all of these companies or whatever it is, but those numbers are inflated if you got the same account, in 3 different patches. 2 of the people are going to lose it, one's going to keep it, and now you got 2 reps with 39, one with 40, or whatever your numbers are. But yeah, it's you're gonna have to go back and recarve everything if you didn't clean your plate in the beginning, because it's not, to your point, it might look balanced, but it won't be.
Turns out it isn't. Yeah, no, exactly right. Now I know we're going to want to move on to the next step in a second here, but I've seen a couple people in the chat mention hierarchies as well, and part of that data cleanup exercise is usually linking accounts. How do you guys tackle that? I know you're now moving into segments of enterprise versus commercial. What does that look like for Capado?
So Lincoln hierarchies has been complicated because of some unique data challenges that we have, where in some instances there will be tolerated duplicates, and that can sometimes skew how those hierarchies go. But what we've done to mitigate that is cleaning up our record types and using hierarchies. You can do some really cool stuff with roll-ups. So I created kind of like a hierarchy level customer roll-up, so that each account in that hierarchy will get stamped with a total number of customers in that hierarchy. So maybe that business unit or that sub itself is a prospect. They don't have a deal with us, but maybe somewhere within their corporate family, we do have a customer. You could go into traction hierarchies and click on it and look in there and see that data. But if you say you're just trying to look at your total patch and you got 60 accounts in there, you're not going to click into each one of them. So created a roll-up field, and you can see that on the account level. You can pull it into your reports, and so you can kind of sort things by that. And our sales cycles typically 90 to 100 days. There's a lot of legal and infosec that needs to take place post close. So even after you've done your demo and your prospect says, hey, I want this, it looks good, we got budget, let's wrap this thing up. You still got to go through legal, still got to go through the security, because we are connecting into their Salesforce org. So there's a lot of compliance, especially with finance and healthcare. So if you've already got a customer in that hierarchy, a lot of times you can lean on the MSA you might already have in place. You can piggyback off all of the existing legal and security work that you've already done with that family. And so maybe you can see, hey, there's intent data that's high on this account. There's already a customer in this corporate family. Instead of telling my BDR to go work some of these accounts, we need to pull something quick for the quarter. Let's see if we can shorten that deal cycle down to maybe 45 days, because we don't have to go through all the legal and stuff. So we've been able to do a lot of really cool, flexible data points with how we structure these hierarchies at the moment. So it's not just been a resource to territory planning, but to really go to market as a whole.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, that's great. And there's a huge importance on that, because we've found at least that a ton of territory disputes fall into a hierarchy, that you were working a subsidiary or someone was working a subsidiary and didn't realize, with a different name, different location, different size of business, that it was part of a bigger business. And that it really comes down to a couple things, though, on the data, and obviously if you have it linked, but two, your policy. And does someone own, when they own an account, do they own the full family tree? If they own a headquarters or whatnot, and also how you're covering your territories. It looks like someone on the chat is looking at using kind of domestic HQs for the hierarchy, and that's great as well. As long as that policy is set and then the data is cleaned up to reflect it, all of a sudden you can set up your territories and you can set up your routing rules as well. And that kind of segues into the third step, which is to try and automate as much as possible, because you mentioned at the beginning as well, Matt, that when leads come in, that can be another major source of conflicts, because that lead isn't assigned appropriately. All of a sudden you're causing a conflict before you even recognize it, because someone's going to be the recipient. That kid gets that, I think you said the Verizon lead. If they start to chase it, there's your conflict when this is a major enterprise. But that if your rules aren't in place, if your data isn't cleaned up, that's going to be difficult to do. So how have you guys kind of tackled that?
So with regards to automation, this is where it gets tricky, because it's like, all right, this stuff is great, it helps, but kind of back to dirty data, like your automation and the functionality that you're going to get out of all of these tools is going to be very contingent upon the quality of your data. If you're automating where leads get routed and you got a bunch of duplicates, you're no longer involved in manually ensuring that that lead's ending up in the right place. Of course, there's reporting and things that can help you keep an eye on this stuff. But as you scale and say your marketing ramps up and your teams get bigger, your ability to keep your eye on every little thing's gonna go down quite a bit. And so that's part of some of the struggles we've had in automating some of these processes, is that back to dirty data, like we spend time doing it, but at the same time getting lead routing up and running is a huge priority. So it's like, there's only so much bandwidth, right? And so you get this stuff launched and you'll still have issues. And back to like the contact automation, like if you got a tool that's scrubbing your email, dumping contacts into Salesforce for you automatically, if your data's dirty, it's probably matching the wrong accounts, putting contacts in the wrong places. With that being said, though, in a utopia state, it has made quite the difference in our ability to cut our response times down quite a bit. I'm a big believer that time kills all deals. And so things like in our flows, we've been able to identify, all right, a lead comes in, of course, do your best to look at the domain, address information, match this to the right account, find out who owns this account, alert the BDR that's aligned to that account, tell them to get on this lead. But we've been able to build it out even more complex such that it can scrub to see, all right, before we do that, is there an opportunity on this account? Is it in a Is it in a mature stage? If so, do we want a BDR, just kind of cold following up with this guy like, hey, thanks for reaching out. What can we talk to you about? When there's a deal, conversations happening with executives, that's certainly something they need to know before following up on that. The conversation can change a little bit. Hey, thanks for submitting interest. Did you know that we're already having talks with these departments? I can see on the op it's this person, this person. Do you know them? Are you reaching out on behalf of them? Or maybe this deal's happening in a silo, and that person that just put that lead in is the champion you didn't know you had, that's going to help you take this deal over the line. Maybe they should be a part of the deal. And so, yeah, the automations are set to scrub all these factors first and then alert whoever's going to be responding to that up front. Hey, before you call this person, just know there's a deal. We've sent a quote out already. This is the business units that they're working in. Here's all the relevant information. So when you're following up, you look like you got your stuff together.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And that actually touches on the last tactic. There's a visibility, because all of this work, all of the policies and all of the data cleanup and all of the carving for equal territories really don't mean a lot unless your reps have that visibility and that understanding of what's in their territory and what isn't. And so what we've seen a lot of people do well is giving that understanding, like you're talking about right now on that lead. So immediately once a lead's come in and it's assigned, making sure that it's matched to the account, and then providing that rich history data that you're talking about. Hey, is there an opt out? They've sent a contract, or have we closed deals in the past? And making that forefront on the lead itself, so that whoever's responding can have that coherent conversation and not just pitch them as if they're a brand new customer. And then on top of that, presenting things like the hierarchy, and not just where you typically find it in Salesforce. So typically it's in that small little icon on the account record only at the top. Because what we find is that not many sales reps tend to actually go to the account record very often, right? They're going there in order to get to the contact or to the opportunity.
Yeah.
So you want to put that visibility where they're going to be, put it on the contact, put it on the opportunity record, so that now they have no excuse. They can immediately see, hey, this, either to your point earlier, this contact is falling into the Netherlands account when it should be in the US, or whatever it may be. And likewise that, hey, I'm on a Hulu record and it's actually part of Walt Disney. Or for that young kid who receives the Verizon lead, that, hey, this is actually a global account and it's owned by several people and there's millions of dollars in revenue from it. To make that immediately apparent by putting it on those page layouts, so that they can then avoid those disputes and recognize, oh, this isn't part of my territory. This is clearly part of the sales west, or whatever, however your territories are carved out.
Yeah, I mean, ideally that Verizon account in that example would have been assigned to the right person to start with, and the automation would have just had it flow right where it's supposed to be. But then again, in the case of maybe the enrichment mishap where it's connected it to the wrong entity, the wrong revenue number showed up, trying to carve 40,000 accounts, can't really look at all of them. You pick your data points, pick your segments, cut your pie up, assign it out, and if it just happened to fall under the wrong revenue tier, it very likely could have got assigned to the wrong segment based on a error with the data or with the automation in the first place. And so, yeah, to your point, having a fail safe for your fail safe,
yeah,
being able to catch it early, and if you've over communicated the policy and they know what's going to happen, if they end up working it, then they'll be more likely to go ahead and say something right up front.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're right. There's always going to be an exception. There's always going to be something that slips through the cracks. And so having your teams understand that policy, be able to recognize and to use their head when it probably doesn't make sense for a brand new rep to own a company like Verizon.
Yeah, I've noticed sitting in a lot of these demos, you get pitched like this utopia state, like this tool is literally going to solve all of your problems. You will not have any
Yeah,
stress after you
yeah,
buy this. And what I've found is it's really just not the case.
of course.
Just even if it's working as hard as it can, sometimes there can be other factors that will offset the automation, or lead it to do something else. And so again, a tool kind of like this hierarchy tool will, it's not necessarily going to do it for you unless you've set it up to do so, but to this point, give you that visibility such that you can catch things that maybe had good intentions. It's not always a malicious intent, somebody trying to get over on something they know they shouldn't be doing. Sometimes it's just innocent, and just the planning manager, such as myself, put it in the wrong spot, and the lead hit, and this fired, and the data was wrong, and it just it is what it is. And so yeah, getting that visibility is going to be huge in having an offset, because if you go into any of this stuff thinking that one of these things is going to solve all your problems and just make your life perfect and make your Salesforce just the cleanest thing in the world, I mean, it's just you're mistaken. So
Yeah, no, exactly. Um, yeah, and I liked what you said at the beginning, that you're kind of learning from the mistakes you made in the past. I always tell my kids that failing isn't the most fun way to learn, but it's certainly the most successful. That you're probably not going to do it again, and so you make your mistake, you learn from it, and you advance in the future. And I love that shameless plug you gave us earlier in our tool, and
yeah,
I'll take that every day. But you're exactly right, and
sure.
that's why we're not talking about one step here. There's really 5 steps which all break down into lots more, and that it takes all of them to avoid those territory disputes. There's no one tool that's gonna do everything for you. You mentioned earlier that you guys are now moving towards enterprise and kind of a land and expand, and I love that for a couple reasons. One, I think it's a natural progression, but two, I think what you're talking about already, and providing those territories and giving that visibility, should hopefully lend really well to providing kind of almost a map or an instruction on where to go next if you've sold one product and expanding. How does that work in at Capado?
So land and expand, typically it can work two ways. One is within the org that you're already in. A lot of times they'll just pilot it. Maybe they're not, in our case, going to further a whole dev team with licenses in the very start. And so that puts pressure on success to get them up and running, get them successful, and show them the, you do the ROI in the pitch, but like every SaaS pitch promises, a 300% ROI. Like you just, it's standard. So getting it up and running and seeing it in real time is where the rubber meets the road. And so once they do that, they're able to say, all right, great, let's scale into this, dump our whole team in here. We absolutely need it. But then on the other end of that, we've got how you maneuver within the hierarchy itself, within the org itself. Hey, there's other companies of a similar size with a similar, let's call it Salesforce complexity, we can assume based on their size, or you can go on LinkedIn and get an idea of how many developers are in there and how complex their support is. And it's like, hey, maybe we should reach out to these other people, again, lean on the MSAs, legal security agreements that we've already taken the trouble to go through, leverage your existing champion, and having the hierarchy visibility makes it a lot easier to do that, versus like going to the company website and trying to find the board and who's connected and press releases, who did they just buy and acquire, and trying to, do it the old school way. Now, we can just click on there and I can see a full breakdown of, hey, this falls under this falls under this, these are connected here. To the person's point, who is that? Was that Brenton from Salt Lake talking about trying to expand into EMEA? We see a lot of times, especially like if you're in South America, tons of ties back to Europe with South American business. And so being able to just see all that hey, maybe we should split these hierarchies up on a macro region level. Hey, you get the US, y'all get Europe, you get, whoever can speak the language gets the account, kind of thing. But in that instance, you can still see, okay, great, the US sub is a customer. So, hey, I'm working this Europe deal. I can immediately see who owns this account. I can see they're a customer. Hey, can you get on, funky time zone call for me and help speak to this guy? We're trying to build this deal out over here in Europe or Japan or whatever. And, think we'd get a little bit more traction if you could have somebody internally, a colleague, speak to the success that you've had or whatnot. So, I mean, there's a couple of different ways to flip the coin, but kind of back to the visibility point is every company's gonna have a different strategy or a different go-to-market that's gonna work for them. But being able to see all the puzzle pieces up front is gonna show you how you need to put it together. Just like back to the kid example, like, start building a puzzle, you can fill in them corners first, make sure you go around and start to piece those puzzle together from there. And that's what we've got the ability to do with the visibility. It won't necessarily tell you what play to run, but it'll show you how the pieces are on the board, and you can make your own best judgment from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that instruction set kind of thing. Well, Matt, this is fantastic. So I think if I break it back down, the 5 steps that I heard from you is like, first, kind of get your policies or rules of engagement in place ahead of time to kind of temper those emotions when conflicts do come up in the future. To then cleaning up your database, cleaning up the data, making sure that it's enriched with the firmographics. If you need to deduplicate, to your point earlier, if you have dupes in an account, it'll throw your scoring off, and linking those hierarchies together. Then actually getting into the carving of the territories and defining things like, well, what happens when you own an account that's part of a bigger business? Do you own the entire family tree or not? Or to Brenton's point, if it's domestic HQ, do you own just that country and territory? Fourth would be to automate as much as you can, because those leads are a major source of conflicts, making sure that leads are routed to the right people to avoid any of that. And sometimes in a lot of businesses, I know they're routed to business development or SDR team, who then subsequently pass that on as an opportunity to the sales reps. And all of that can be automated as well. And because those rules have been defined logically, you can then just put that logic into routing tools to be able to make sure that it's assigned appropriately. And that cuts down on those response times, like you were saying. And then once it's automated, both account assignment, op assignment, and leads, to expose all that information, the matching of the leads to accounts so that they can see the history in the background, the hierarchies themselves, displaying them on the ops and the contacts and the accounts, so that you can then recognize when there might be one of these edge cases that have slipped through the cracks, that, hey, this is part of a Verizon or this is part of a Walt Disney, probably doesn't fall into my territory. And you can avoid those situations where the very influential sales reps, bring a bottle of wine by the SDR's desk to try and convince them that it should be going to them, that you can very clearly see who it should actually go to. So I think those are the 5 steps that I heard from you. Did I miss anything there?
No, I think that's a great summary. And then within all of that, I'd say just again, back to the self-awareness, a little bit of humility, get to the end of the year, realize where you messed up, admit your faults, and get together, have those conversations with the people who most likely were most impacted by that, and see if you can tweak things for the next year, make sure it aligns. This year coming up, I'm sure everybody's going to be less focused on new logos, more focused on customer retention, expansion. And so, your playbook's going to change, but certainly having the conversations, allowing yourself the visibility into seeing, okay, if we do pivot our strategy, do we even have in place the visibility and tools we need to come up with whatever the new play is going to be? So yeah, I mean, stick to the 5 fundamentals as you've outlined, and throw a little humility and self-awareness in there, and I think you'd be set.
Nice. That's awesome. We've been getting a lot of questions lately about how long does this kind of stuff take? How long do people tend to take to carve their territories? So before I kind of dive into what we've been hearing, what do you guys see at Capado? When do you start the process, and when do you try and have it rolled out for?
Shit, on that one. It changes. Ideally, I'd like to have, I mean, a couple months in a perfect world, but it just doesn't always break out that way. And so I don't know, we're coming into let's see, our fiscal year starts in February. So I mean, minimum by January 1st, it would be ideal to have leadership approval on new segments, on how things are getting broken up, at least on a macro level. And then typically we'll put our recommendations in for what we've seen. We'll have the conversations, we'll get their buy-in, and then, you know, we can fill in the details about the, you know, more specifics of the KPIs and rules of engagements or whatnot. But typically we like to get started. I mean, really, it's just me and a handful of others over here, so not a huge support. So I need a month to get into the data and carve this up, make sure it's balanced, that I'm not snatching people's deals or customers, and then I'm keeping momentum where it's at. And you know, if you got more resources, you know, great. But
Yeah.
I need
Yeah.
minimum a month to do the work, not to have the conversation and figure it out, but to actually do the work. I need a few weeks.
Totally. Yeah. And you know what? We heard very, very similar from a lot of companies. It all depends on the size. DocuSign, companies like DocuSign, that size can take up to 6 months. Others are 3 months. And then like yourself, 1 month. What we found is that cleaning up things like hierarchies can be done as quickly as, you know, 2 weeks. And then if all the rules are done in terms of your automation, you can actually set that up in a tool in about 2 weeks as well.
Yeah, well, so setting up automation, cleaning hierarchies, that's not a part of my month. I need a month to build the territories.
To do that ahead of time.
But
Yeah.
yeah, to have the conversations, to get approval on the segmentation, to clean the data, to build the automation. I mean, yeah, I think that's ongoing. I mean, we're doing this all year because we're looking at the automation, seeing where it's fallen short. We're making tweaks. I mean, that's kind of the never ending job. All of that part is, yeah, I mean, there's not enough time ever for that
in the year.
I mean, yeah, that doesn't, that's
Yeah.
not a thing. We had a question up here about if you got 10 years of duplicate data, how long do you think that would take? And yeah, I wouldn't even know where to start on that. Y'all have a new deduplicating tool outside of your hierarchies and leads, don't you?
We do. Yeah, no, I love that plug too. Thank you. And I actually didn't even see that question. So thanks for bringing that up.
It's in the Q&A.
Okay. And I know we're at time here. So Gina, we'll wrap up in a second just to answer that one. Yeah, it all depends on the number of records, not the years that you've had them, but you can get through a full dedupe process in, I'd say 3 weeks is a very legitimate time frame. And really what the time breaks down to isn't running it, it's deciding your internal rules on who should survive, what fields are going to survive, and which ones are going to disappear. And once those are decided on, it's actually a really quick process. And you'd want to go through waves. You want to start at the simple, clear duplicates, exact match on name and address, get a little fuzzier, down to maybe they don't have a full address to go on. If you're talking accounts, contacts, of course, you use the email address and whatnot and phone numbers. And you break it down that way. But yeah, so I think we need to wrap up here, guys. We're a little bit over. But I'd say we'll be sending out that checklist on how to avoid territory conflicts. So keep an eye out in your email for that. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at tractioncomplete.com. Gina, thanks so much for having us. Sorry we ran over.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
You too.
You too. Thanks.